And turning to politics now, President Obama slammed at the national menorah lighting ceremony, a rabbi furious over his decision not to stop a UN vote against Israel settlements. This as tensions grow between the president and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Our very own Kristen Fisher live in Washington, D.C. this morning with the very latest on that. Good morning, Kristen.
Good morning, Jackie. Well, the Israeli government is accusing the Obama administration of not only refusing to block that UN resolution, but also creating and campaigning for its passage. Well, that prompted a very strong reaction from senior White House officials. They say, quote, the U.S. did not draft this resolution, nor did the U.S. introduce this resolution. The Egyptians, in partnership with the Palestinians, are the ones who began circulating an earlier draft of the resolution. But at the same time, the U.S. did refused to use its veto power at that Security Council vote condemning Israeli settlements on the West Bank. Well, the move prompted Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to recall the U.S. ambassador, saying friends don't take friends to the Security Council.
Over decades, American administrations and Israeli governments have disagreed about settlements, but we agreed that the Security Council was not the place to resolve this issue. We knew that going there would make negotiations harder and drive peace further away.
Well, tensions between the U.S. and Israel escalated even more overnight when the rabbi who was in charge of the national Hanukkah menorah lighting ceremony, which is held right outside of the White House, he used the ceremony to publicly criticize the Obama administration's actions.
I know that some of us are so sad at what happens there with regard to Israel. We must remember that the way to counter any darkness, any disappointment, is not with harsh rhetoric, not with anger, but by creating light.
Or perhaps through a new administration. The Israeli Prime Minister says he's looking forward to working with President-elect Trump come January 20th, which is now Inauguration Day, just 25 days away. Hard to believe, Jackie and Lisa.
25 days. Can you imagine?
I 25 days.
I can't even believe this year's over. In 25 days, that
It's been a fast one.
All right, thank you, Kristen, live in our nation's capital.
Tensions between Israel and the Obama administration are going public and laid bare. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accusing President Obama and his administration of a diplomatic ambush, saying the U.S. orchestrated a UN resolution condemning Israel for settlements in the West Bank. The U.S. officially abstained from that UN vote on Friday instead of vetoing it, as it has for many years.
The White House issuing a statement saying in part, quote, the U.S. did not draft this resolution, nor did the U.S. introduce this resolution. The Egyptians, in partnership with the Palestinians, are the ones who began circulating an earlier draft of the resolution. The Egyptians are the ones who moved it forward on Friday.
Joining us now, David Keyes, spokesman for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem, where it is already late Monday night. David, nice to see you, sir.
Nice to see you, too.
Yesterday, you told us that the Israelis had, your government had, ironclad information that the United States, the Obama administration, was behind this. They didn't simply sit back, as that statement would lead us to believe. Can you share any more? Can you tell us what you have or how you thought this went down to refute what the White House is saying?
I can tell you that those sources come from the Arab world and internationally, and what we're going to do is share it with the new administration through the proper channels, and if they choose to share that further, that's their prerogative. But there's no masking the fact that Israel is deeply, deeply disappointed in this Security Council resolution. It actually calls the Western Wall occupied Palestinian territory, one of the most holy sites to the Jewish people, a place where Jews have returned to and prayed at for literally thousands of years. It's outrageous, it's shameful, and we are deeply, deeply disappointed that President Obama has abandoned Israel in this forum.
I get that you're angry, but there's a difference between sort of abandoning, in other words, just sort of stepping off to the sidelines and letting Israel get thrown under the proverbial bus here by Senegal and New Zealand and Malaysia, who all were the ones behind this, at least publicly behind it. It's very different if you actually push an ally under the bus, and this bus being the UN resolution. Which was it? Were you pushed under the bus, or did the bus simply get hit and the U.S. didn't protect you?
Well, as I said yesterday, the evidence is ironclad, and we're completely confident in that. And the Prime Minister said it best: friends don't take friends to the Security Council. I mean, this is a deeply flawed body which is so obsessive about Israel, the one liberal democracy in the Middle East with gay rights and women's rights and free speech and an independent judiciary. It doesn't quite have the time to get to the hundreds of thousands of Syrians who have been slaughtered just in the last few years. So this isn't really the place to bring about peace. Peace is going to come about when the Palestinians and Israelis finally sit with each other and work out that deal that we want so much. But when the Palestinian leadership refuses to even sit down with Israel, does that bring peace closer, or does that push it farther away? When the Palestinian leadership is paying a monthly salary to anyone who murders an Israeli, let me repeat that, anyone who murders an Israeli gets a monthly salary from the Palestinian government. Does that bring peace closer, or does that push it farther away?
It's clear that the Prime Minister has decided he doesn't have a negotiating partner on the other side in Mahmoud Abbas. So our viewers know I've stood at the same window you're at right now, and it's the entrance to Jerusalem. So there's a lot of times there's sirens that go by. We don't know where those lights are headed and those sirens are headed. We sure hope everybody's okay. But it underscores sort of the tension that is in Israel right now as it relates to what's going on with the Palestinians. Obviously, we've had the stabbing attacks. We've had those ambush drive-over attacks and those kinds of things. You all have to be a little bit concerned that this will embolden more attacks.
Well, I think the resolution seeks to isolate, seeks to encourage parties around the world to treat Israel differently, to distinguish Israel, over a certain line in Jerusalem, outside of Jerusalem. But we reject that. It's true that there is tension, but Israel remains very hopeful about the future, hopeful about the world coming to Israel in spite of this vote, and hopeful, frankly, that peace can be attained. But what needs to happen in order for peace to be attained is not going to take place at the Security Council. It's not going to come about through ganging up on Israel. Well, it's going to come about through direct and bilateral negotiations. And tragically, the Palestinian leadership has refused to even speak with the Prime Minister of Israel. How can you have peace with someone who you can't even sit at the table with?
There's at least some foreshadowing that the vote at the UN was the beginning, not the end, of the Christmas surprise by the Obama administration. This coming to us from the Jerusalem Bureau. Ben Rhodes, the Deputy National Security Advisor to President Obama, just gave an interview on Israeli Channel 2, the main network there, saying that in the near future, Secretary of State Kerry will present the U.S.-American government vision to end the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Kerry is expected to present a statement that will recognize the Palestinian state based on the 1967 borders. The statement is expected to be made public, obviously, before President Obama leaves office. How concerned are you about this, and what will happen if this happens?
Well, we're definitely concerned, not because we don't want peace, but because we have a lot of experience about how peace comes about. And when Israel attained peace with Egypt and Jordan, it came about through direct negotiations. It didn't come about through imposing upon Israel a solution. So I imagine a future, and I think all Israelis and all Palestinians deserve to live with peace and with dignity, with hope for a brighter future. And that's the position of the Prime Minister, to actually sit down with the Palestinian leader for peace talks. But unfortunately, our repeated calls, really to the tune of hundreds of calls, have been constantly rejected, and that's a travesty because it's pushing peace farther away.
I have to push back on you a little bit here, and there's an issue here that relates around what's called settlements, which is building in land that the Palestinian thinks is theirs, they want for their future state. Some of the settlements are near Jerusalem, some are a long way away, and what is generally thought to be, as part of any final status agreement, part of a future Palestinian state. The complaint of the Obama administration is that your Prime Minister continues to allow and encourage building on those settlements that are way out in the West Bank. Is that really the best way to achieve peace, to say we want to negotiate, but at the same time we're building on places that we're negotiating about?
The presence of Jews in Judea and in Jerusalem has never been the source of this conflict. Long before there was a single so-called settler, this conflict raged. And when Israel took out every single Israeli, every single Jew who was living in Gaza, we didn't get peace. We got tens of thousands of rockets on the heads of civilians, and a group that called for genocide against all Jews that came to power and terrorized Israelis constantly. The conflict would be a lot easier to solve if it was about a few homes. But unfortunately, the settlements that the Palestinian leadership is talking about is Tel Aviv, and it's Jaffa, and it's Haifa. And they're continually trying to undermine the very idea of a Jewish state. They refuse to recognize Israel as a Jewish state. And so therefore the conflict today isn't about homes, it isn't about Jews living on this side of a line or on that side of a line. It goes to the very heart of whether or not there is room in the Middle East for one Jewish state. We believe there is, and we hope the Palestinians come to believe that too. And when that mutual recognition takes place, that mutual respect, that mutual dignity, then we can have true and lasting peace.
Well, and to your point, David, you all more than believe. You fought for it and shed a lot of blood for the state of Israel. David Keyes, spokesman for the Israeli Prime Minister, appreciate you being with us. And if Mr. Rhodes proves true and form to his statements, I suspect we'll be talking to you a lot more over the next couple of weeks. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
All the best.